everything you're watching is tier 15, 16, double corruption, triple plus level of bosses difficulty. I've done my pinnacle bosses with this, my 4th ascension, everything without 6 links and without buying the very expensive multiple divines unique pieces. I've done that and created a list of links for you guys so that you can buy gear on a budget and perform in a similar way that I have. I've done this by using math and buying interesting stats on different items, and I hope you guys are gonna enjoy what I've done. This is the more endgame geared version of the previous one, which was mid-game, so slightly more expensive, more levels, but still it's not like a level 100 build. For those that have asked for a more finished endgame build, hope you guys enjoy this. Put a lot of effort in being able to achieve this result with those type of gear. Ace of Spades here, welcome to Goblin-Inc. This is an update, part 2 of my previous monk build, where we dive into the more late game, deeper version of the build for who wants to play it. As always, I kept the build quite friendly in terms of budget. It can clear all T16 content without 60 links, pinnacle bosses, without anything crazy expensive, no crazy expensive uniques. I found a bunch of ways, mathematical ways to break things down, make them work for cheap options. I have links so you can buy the gear for a reasonable price. And I answer questions like, is a physical weapon better or an elemental weapon better? Crit damage, not crit damage. And how can a rare item that is fairly cheap be better than an item worth 6 divine? All of that soon. Before that, a quick word from our sponsor, the Crimson Market. Every month, they are giving away a themed computer that they custom build. They can be themed around games. There's Last Epoch computer, Path of Exile clock apparently is coming probably next month. Dragonlight, the Bumblebee. There was also a previous one from Path of Exile, like this one. You can join the first month for free with the golden ticket. I'll leave you a link down below. The longer you are part of the program, the more points you get, the more likely you are to win a computer. At the end of the month, the computers are given away on a popular stream platform like from Footage or Rocks or Dioxide. The first thing I want to showcase you is we're going to talk about this pair of gloves here, which I bought for only a couple of exalts. I'm sure the price will go up a little, but the key is that it is a bad base. It is low ES, low evasion. But when you take a look at critical damage bonus, level of all melee skills, and the lightning damage, because also our weapon is going to have increased elemental damage with attacks, and we operate in a certain scenario mathematical with certain talents, choices, etc., this ends up being, as you can see, the same damage, I'm going to show you now the video, of using the very expensive 6 divine gloves everyone is playing on it. The attack speed for us doesn't matter, as Flicker Strike is bound by our power charges, so on bosses we want 1 Flicker Strike, spends the charges, kills the boss, that's done. So with this type of gloves, we can save 6 divine and have the exact same damage. If you can see now, I'm gonna show you. My Flicker Strike from 38,000 damage, I take those gloves off, goes down to 29. We lost an insane chunk of damage, almost 10,000 damage lost from a very cheap pair of gloves. The elemental damage weapon is better than the physical one. Having critical damage bonus with soul cores is better. Critical damage bonus on the weapon is incredibly important, the most important thing. And high lightning damage. You can go cheaper on the fire damage or cold damage if you want, one of the two. You can go lower on the increased elemental damage, lower on the level of melee skills, and critical hit chance is better than gain life or even level 2 all melee skills if you get critical hit chance, because mostly our damage comes from crits. A bunch of other optimizations we're gonna go through is, for example, having quality to lightning modifier for our rings. As you can see, this ring has both lightning damage and increased lightning damage. Now, I did eye roll this ring and exalted it with 2 more rests, but I am so incredibly overcapped in rests. I have plus 60 extra resistances in cold, more than 30 in fire, another 10, 15 in lightning. I have over 100% extra resistances that I don't need, and my items have +1 all rests, so you really don't need those resistances that I have on my items. But the core is that we want to get stats that are cheap, like increased lightning damage and lightning damage are cheap on a ring. So what you want to do is you want to get rings that give you damage, maybe quit 1 rest, and then go quality to lightning modifier. Now, the interesting thing is that for this build, we're going to be needing actually an unset ring, which is another base. It's not a good base, but for us, which we need 1 extra slot, is actually a good base. And again, we can get the lightning damage and things that benefit from lightning modifiers. Plus to all elemental resistances, lightning resistance, lightning damage, and increased lightning damage benefit from quality lightning modifiers. So that's what you want to look for. Evasion is also an interesting, decent stats on those rings. The same is can be said for intelligence and dexterity. Those are good stats to have because we are quite hungry for that. This allows us pretty much to go cheap on other items. For my helmet, instead, I focus up more on high energy shield and evasion. Don't really care too much about the rest. We don't need life on our items. We're gonna be going CI, meaning we also don't need chaos rest, so we save a lot of money on gear by not needing life and not needing chaos resistances. On top of that, we don't really need mana because we're not archmage. So our gear end up being quite cheap because it has a lot of dead stats that people don't like. For the amulet, I go with increased defense quality, and I go super defensive on my amulet. I'm gonna have a very high defense amulet with evasion, maximum energy shield, and increased maximum energy shield. Then, on that item, if you can find either level 2 melee skills, or dexterity or intelligence, or a resistance, that's fine. But we are gonna prioritize the evasion, energy shield, and increase maximum energy shield because it gives us so much defense. Look at that, 60%, boom, 64 with that. Well, of course, we lost a lot because we also lost wind dance, but we lost also 800 energy shield by not having it. Boots are just resistances and movement speed. You don't need the mana. Getting one res on here or two small ones with a good dexterity or intelligence roll is great. You don't need the maximum mana on it. So this is what I've got, and we're gonna do some updates on stats. There are a lot of questions, for example, well, the tree has been updated quite a bit. We're gonna go over that. And we've studied a lot the ascendancy points and what they can do for us. A good and interesting question to answer is critical hit chance better or worse than critical damage bonus? And how does, for example, increased elemental damage compare? So this is the ranking. Critical damage bonus is better than 10% elemental damage. And then the worst stat is actually critical hit chance. Even for me, that I have a low critical hit chance base, because my weapon does not have critical hit chance, I benefit more from the critical damage bonus. I still achieve about a 40% crit chance, 43, so that's still fine. These stats here, also the magnitude of shock is quite strong, as it ends up being a damage multiplier for us because we make a bigger shock. A bigger shock is simply it's a multiplier, it's not additive damage. We start to have quite a bit of additive damage when all is included because we have 50% damage additive from the Herald. The Herald of Thunder gives us 50% lightning damage, which is also why having lightning damage on the weapon and lightning damage on my gear is strong, because we benefit a lot from those lightning damage modifier from the Herald, giving us an extra, 50% increased lightning damage while we are affected by the Herald of Thunder. So that's very powerful. I have dove out of these nodes here, which gives us evasion and dexterity, and in the end attack speed here. They're not worth it. It's much better to go a defensive setup with energy shield. I really like having over 4000 energy shield and doubling that energy shield with very OP Grim Fist plus Ghost Dance. Grim Fist grants us a 200 energy shield per remnant, and we can double our energy shield. We can go over the cap, meaning that we're gonna be having over 8000 energy shield. That's a lot. We also recover a lot of our energy shield with our Ghost Dance because we have a very high base of evasion. I've also added that the flask now recover our energy shield. So pretty much this build is a monster tank with 78% evasion and 71% physical damage reduction. Very impressive stats, considering that I also am super overcapped in resistances with +1 all res on there. Now, I have added a neck anointment because people want to see a more endgame version of the build, and I've found the most cost-effective one. The most cost-effective one is Overwhelming Strike, which gives us both crit damage and critical hit chance. Other options that are okay-ishly, but not as good, would have been 40% damage here and critical hit chance here. They're storm charged. The best overall is +1 all res and 25% increase maximum energy shield, which would be prohibitive in terms of cost. It's cost several divines, so I've decided not to use it for this video. We get the stun threshold based off our maximum energy shield, so that 12% of it, so that we don't get stunned. Never gets really stunned. There are maps where mobs have increased stun build up, which you do get stunned, but we're gonna be getting one jewel where we can get 8% extra maximum energy shield as additional stun threshold as a jewel, so that we can remove that weaknesses from my version of the build. Me currently, I haven't bought the jewel, but I will include it for you. There's gonna be 2 links for jewels. One is gonna be with evasion and some damage. Evasion very important, because the more evasion we have, the more energy shield we recover, and also the more armor we get, plus we evade attacks, which of course is OP. So we're gonna mix up 2 jewels with evasion and some damage, and 1 for preventing us to be stunned. That's what I'm gonna go for. And if you can get some shock maybe on it, that's gonna be fine. I'm not playing with electrocution, it's too many points. You're gonna stick to the classical build, and what you're gonna do is that at the end you go for the crit nodes and a crit damage and a crit chance. You take everything else that isn't crit, and you take the crit at the end. I really like the evasion and energy shield nodes. I take all of them pretty much. And to solve our mana issues, we simply go Siphon. And Siphon is enough to not need to press your mana pot with a 2% mana on kill, because we have quite a bit more mana now that we have high intelligence. We do not run life leech, mana leech, because we are purely elemental weapon, meaning that we regenerate a ton of our mana from Siphon. We have a little bit more mana regeneration from Step like Mist, which gives us mana regeneration, stats, which are important, and move speed alike. So those are the changes that I've made for the talent tree. The rest has remained similar. Now we're gonna move on and talk about the gem. As you can see, I've added 1 more slot because of my unset ring, which is very important. And what I've added is Grim Fist is incredibly important when you play with CI and Chaos Inoculation. I would say that in the very beginning, it's easier to be live. But like mid-game, when you have just a little bit of gear, CI and energy shield is way cheaper to build and way more efficient, because you don't need life on gear, so it costs less. You don't need mana on gear because you're not an archmage, so the gear costs less. You don't need chaos resistance, so the gear costs less, and it makes the build really, really cheap. We don't need uniques, so the build remains quite cheap. Some updates for gems. Let's go over them. For my basic attack, which is actually one-shotting most elite mobs right now, most rares, I have the combination of super critical with inevitable critical, because I don't use my basic attack often. Most of the times I'm using Flicker Strike. And if you want to see how to play the build and not run out of charges, so the previous video has it in the intro. You can watch that to see the intro of the video where I explain how to play the build in the beginning. We have martial tempo for more attack speed and practiced combo, so we can get the bell going on bosses faster. And inevitable crit, meaning that your first attack is gonna crit plus 100% more crit damage bonus. It's a huge hit on those elite mobs. You can one-shot them even without Flicker Stab. For the Flicker Strike, I always call it Flicker Stab, I don't know why. We have close combat, perpetual charge, momentum, and concentrated effect. My lingering illusion, always good to generate charges on bosses, especially if you're running pinnacle bosses or things of the like. Tempest Bell with rage, Hourglass, and I tried knockback, I didn't like it. Magnified effect remains the best for me. I was not inspired by some comments saying that knockback is better. I've tried it and it wasn't for me. Charge stuff, if you can add another, if you want to waste your money, add another slot here. I really don't think that this skill needs more than 3 gems. It is about it, honestly. I've been not needing Tempest Bell to kill bosses in 16 corrupted, double corrupted, and +4 difficulty bosses. I don't even need Tempest Bell anymore, so you could even remove it almost. It does so much damage. Charge stuff remains with persistence, lightning infusion, conduction, and overcharge. Reaper's invocation, most important, profane, impetus, perfusion. Energy retention is not very important, you can skip that. Wind dancer, pin, wind wave, lockdown. Grim Fist with clarity, a little bit more mana regeneration if you have the extra spirit. Herald of Thunder with maim, Culling Strike, Shock Siphon, and Innervate. The Culling Strike is nice. Shock Siphon is okay-ish. We don't really need it anymore because we generate enough with Ghost Dance and Grim Fist. Ghost Dance with Fast Forward and Infernal Cry, very powerful. I've added quality to it so I can get up to 150% increased fire damage, which is a beast. It also empowers my attack to deal 15% more damage. Murderous Intent gives them Culling Strike. And I reduce the cooldown. You need to get a low-level gems. Pretty much by adding one gem with Unsettling, we can add the Grim Fist, which I think is a must-have in a CI build that runs Energy Shield. Very OP. Very, very OP. The Infernal Cry, again, I have so much damage that honestly, just Flicker Strike is enough to kill bosses. But if there is a map with they take less damage from lightning or some really weird mob, or if you're less geared than I am, having the Infernal Cry and of course the Tempest Bell is gonna help out quite a bit. Also, it adds a layer of fire damage to the Tempest Bell, which is really nice. Talking about the Ascensions, I'm gonna tell you what I've tested, what I've liked and did not like. So of course we play with CI, like I said, so we go Energy Shield. For Ascensions, I've tried everything. The extra 10% lightning damage is 10% damage. It's pretty sweet. The Scatter them to the winds is fairly useless. Doesn't do anything. It would be helpful to get the 40% increased damage, and you could even get the 3% mana on attack, but it's a lot of points, and I'd rather invest them into defense. The I Shall Rage, the Unbound Avatar, yeah, you can get 40% damage on bosses, but frankly, it's not worth it, because I'd rather have physical damage reduction than have no physical damage reduction, and then have to have more damage for bosses, which I don't really need. It's not strong enough. You don't get it quick enough. Even I tried to run with Herald of Fire, which, you know, a cheap low-level Herald of Fire, you can actually run it. And I would get a lot of Ignite, and still you don't really get your avatar fast enough to be worth running, in my opinion. My opinion, not dying is king, because dead people make no money, and dead people do no damage either. So in that case, I really prefer, because this build has so much damage, to go heavy on the defense. And I think today I've only died once on a really bad map with the burning damage on the ground, which is horrible for Energy Shield builds. And it also had like stun build up, which got me. And this is it for the build. All the updates, all the improvements, the discoveries. There's no part of building, so I had to muff a bunch of stuff myself, but wasn't too much of a trouble. I hope you guys enjoyed the update. If you want to see the how to play, there's going to be the previous video on how to play the build, remains the same. And the links for buying the gear are in the description. Hope you guys enjoy playing the build. Let me know what you think.